I'm your host, Caleb Greer, and today we're going to talk about hair and fibers in forensic science. Let's go! Hey, there you are. Did you know hair examinations often provide important information for forensic investigations? Also, human and animal hairs have been used for forensic science for over 100 years. Here, I'll show you. Oh, hey, come down. I was admiring my Christmas tree. Did you actually know there's been many times where hair has actually linked the criminal to the case? Like, I'll give you a few examples. In 2001, a man walking his dog in Lindley Woods in West Yorkshire found the body of a 16-year-old Leanne Tierman buried in a shallow grave. She had a black plastic bag over her head held in place with a dog collar, with a scarf and a cable around her neck. The cable ties holding her wrists together. Her murderer had then wrapped her body in a green plastic bin tied with twine. The scarf tied around Leanne Tierman's neck had a few hairs caught in the knot. Unfortunately, there was not sufficient DNA in the roots for a standard DNA profiling. However, the scientists found very small amounts of DNA in the hair shaft and used mitochondrial DNA testing to match it to John Taylor. John Taylor was arrested in October 2001 and sentenced 2 life sentences in July 2002. Oh, hey. Well, since you're here, I guess I'll give you a little information on case number 2. James Agnes was found dead October 16th in 1977 inside his own bar at closing time. James was stabbed 20 times with a steak knife and had been hit 4 times in the head with a blunt object. Hair was found clenched in James's hand and was believed to have come from the suspect, Frank Wright. Hair found clenched in James's hand was sent to a private laboratory in Texas for DNA testing several years later. The DNA showed that the hair belonged to Frank Wright, but by this time he was already deceased. Are you following me? Well, I guess since you're here, I'll tell you about a few careers in hairs and fibers in forensic science. You can be a crime scene investigator known as CSI, which is a specially trained police officer who is dispatched to the crime scene to analyze and document evidence. The evidence might include fibers and hair, along with plant and mineral matter, blood splatter, ballistics, firearms and gunshot evidence, and fingerprints. Also, forensic nursing. Forensic nurses help investigate crimes like sexual and physical assault and accidental death. They are trained in medical evidence collection and criminal justice system. They collect hair on and in the bodies of their patients. In most cases, physical evidence cannot by itself positively identify a suspect, but lab examination may narrow the evidence to a group that includes the suspect. The crime laboratory has developed procedures for comparing and tracing the origins of physical evidence. A high school forensic classes unit on hair and fibers will discuss how to apply these techniques to physical evidence most often encountered at crime scenes. 2 case studies of interest in high school forensic texts include the following. Case 1, the Central Park Jogger case. On April 19, 1989, a young woman left her apartment around 9 p.m. to jog in New York Central Park. Nearly 5 hours later, she was found comatose lying in a puddle of mud in the park. She had been assaulted, her skull was fractured, and she had lost 75% of her blood. When the woman recovered, she had no memory of what happened to her. Already in custody at the police station at Central Park Precinct was a group of 14 and 15-year-old boys who had been rounded up leaving the park earlier that night. Ultimately, 5 of the teenagers who were charged with the crime. Interestingly, none of the evidence collected from the victim could be linked to any of the defendants. However, according to the testimony of a forensic analysis, 2 head hairs collected from the clothing of one of the defendants microscopically compared to those of the victim, and a 3rd hair collected from the same defendant's t-shirt microscopically compared to the victim's hair. Besides these 3 hairs, a 4th hair was found to be similar to the victim's. Hairs were the only pieces of physical evidence offered by the district attorney to directly link any of the teenagers to the crime. The hairs were cited by the district attorney as proof for the jury that the videotaped confessions of the teenagers were reliable. The 5 defendants were convicted and ultimately served from 9 to 13 years. In August 1989, more than 3 months after the jogger attack, New York police arrested a man named Matthias Reyes, who pleaded guilty to several charges. Other DNA tests showed that the hairs offered into evidence at the original trial did not come from the victim, and so could not be used to link the teenagers to the crime. After an 11th month reinvestigation of the original charges, a New York State Supreme Court judge dismissed all the convictions against the 5 teenagers suspects in the Central Park Jogger case. Case 2. The telltale rabbit. On a cold winter's day, a female was found in an alleyway of an East Harlem tenement. Close to the body was a California florist flower box and a plastic liner. The victim was identified as a member of a well-known church who had been selling church literature in the buildings that surrounded the alley in which the body was discovered. The detectives investigating the case forwarded the flower box, the plastic liner, and the victim's clothing to the forensic science laboratory. On the box and liner were found tan wool fibers, red acrylic fibers, and navy blue wool fibers. In addition, the light blue nylon rug fibers and several brown rabbit hairs were found on the box and liner. Similar light blue nylon rug fibers and rabbit hairs, as well as red nylon rug fibers, were found on the victim's tan wool overcoat. Upon further inquiry in the neighborhood, investigators learned the identity of a man who had, the day after the body was discovered, sold a full-length brown rabbit hair coat to a local man. In the suspect's apartment, 2 rugs were found. One was light blue and the other was red. Both rugs were composed of nylon fibers. Samples of each rug were collected by the crime scene unit and forwarded to the forensic science laboratory. The questioned and known rug fibers were found to be consistent in all respects. The presence of light blue nylon rug fibers, red nylon rug fibers, and brown-colored rabbit hairs on the flower box, plastic liner, and the woman's clothing enabled the author to make associations between the woman, flower box, and liner found in the alleyway with the suspect in his apartment. From the evidence, investigators theorized that the woman was killed in the suspect's apartment, placed in the flower box, brought up the roof of the building in which the defendant resided, and thrown off the building into the alleyway below. On the basis of all evidence, the suspect was arrested, indicted, and tried for second-degree murder. Considering a career in forensics, you could get practical experience in a high school forensics class. Here are some of the labs you could perform to get information from hair and fibers. You could look at hair under a microscope to find out if it's human or animal. There are differences that you'll learn in your class. You could also look at fibers under a microscope to tell what piece of fabric it's made of, like cotton or acrylic. All of this information could help you solve a crime, though don't expect to spend all day watching episodes of CSI. Get your path started in forensic science. Register for a class with your advisor. Well, it was nice having you follow me around all day, but you're gonna have to leave. I don't care where you go, but you gotta get out of here.